Hello, this section is called Generating and Uploading a Custom Secure Shell Key for Instances. Now, as a sidebar, this is like the third time I've created this video, so this topic is very picky. So it's an easy idea, it just seems like it's very picky. That's all I have to say. Okay, so before we get into talking about secure shell keys, we're going to broaden the topic to something called metadata and the metadata server. So essentially what this is, when you run your instance, it's running, that instance can actually talk to this metadata server to get data about itself. So things like its instance ID, its host name, that's actually how the startup scripts get delivered to that instance, right? You can actually create your own custom data, and as we will see, something to do with secure shell is also delivered through this metadata, right? And either way, so I want to do is look at where this metadata is stored or how you can see some of that metadata. So if you go into your project, right, and if you were to go through the exercise of creating an instance, okay, I already have one running. We'll come back to it shortly. So let's just create an instance, or at least walk through the steps of creating an instance. At the bottom here under Management tab, you will see, for example, the startup script. That doesn't say metadata, but that's actually part of the metadata that you can provide here. You can type in things here, right? There's explicitly the custom metadata key value pairs you can provide, and we'll see shortly that secure shell keys can be delivered as metadata at the instance level. Okay, but before I get into secure shell keys, I want to talk about another place you can deliver metadata, and that is same under Compute Engine. There's a metadata tab. Okay, and let me dismiss this. So one is, you can see here, this is project level metadata. So when you create these key value pairs here in this tab, right, basically any instance has access to that same metadata. And you can see here, well, foreshadowing here, you can see a secure shell tab under metadata. That means there's something to do with these keys are also delivered through metadata at the project level. Okay, so before we go into that, let's talk about generally about what this whole key business is. So when you want to use secure shell, which is basically remote connection to instances, right? The way that security is managed for this is you get a pair of keys. One's called a public key and one's called a private key. In order for a connection to be made, the two keys need to align. You have to have the right public key to the right private key, and then it all works. So the way this specifically works is that when you go through the exercise of creating these keys, the private key, half the pair, is stored on your laptop or whatever machine you're connecting from to, right? So in this case, my laptop has private keys on it. The public key is stored in the remote instances, and in this case, it's being delivered through that metadata server that we're talking about, right? So I basically need, in order to make a connection, is they're better for whatever private keys I'm using from my laptop, then there better be a matching public key in that metadata tab. So let's look at that metadata tab real quick and see what's in there, or this secure. Now, let this load. Okay, you can see there's 4 entries here, but so far I did not add these manually. These were all auto-generated through some activities that I did. So I'm just going to summarize where these all came from. So 2 of these, right here, the middle ones that have expiration dates on them. So those got created when I was in my instance, which I guess I can go here, console. Okay, let me go back to the instances and remind you how we connected to instances previously. And then I'll match them to these keys. So even though we're using these other tools, there are still keys being used because it says secure shell here. When I used the open browser window option, that is what generated these 2 keys right here. Now why there's 2 keys, I don't know. The top one is the one I would expect. They must have 2 mechanisms, different ways of connecting, and one's a new fancy kind of key, and one is the traditional key. So for whatever reason it creates 2, but these 2 are associated when I use that browser window. Okay. Another one, this bottom one here, that has training lookup, that actually is when we connected using this Cloud Shell. When we use this Cloud Shell and we ran that gcloud command, that actually created a key for this Cloud Shell. Okay, and that's where that key came from. Okay, and then the last key, let's see, where's the keys at? This last key that says jtucker here, this key was actually created when I ran the gcloud from my laptop itself, because I'm logged into my machine as jtucker, and so that's where that key came from. So let me show you where that is. And again, this is very Linux/Mac OS focused. For Windows, it's similar, but things are a little different there. So on Linux or Mac OS, if you look at the folder called Secure Shell, right, this is where all your keys for Secure Shell are stored. And you see these two compute engine keys? Those got created when I ran that gcloud command to Secure Shell into it. It actually created these keys for me. And in particular, if I look at that Google Compute Engine pub key, so it's okay to share the pub key because that's not the private key, right? You can see it has this at jtucker at this funny name right here, and that matches up with this entry right here. Okay, so the idea now is since I have this key on my machine, I should be able to then secure shell in using that key if I use that gcloud command, because it's going to use that key. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go through an exercise of mainly creating yet another key that we can use instead of using the gcloud command, right? I can use secure shell. So for example, right now, that's not what I wanted to do. Oof. What I wanted to do was illustrate here, right? If I try to connect to this IP address using just plain old secure shell, I say yes, and it says it denied because none of my keys, the only key that's, well, none of the keys I have locally are in that list. If I run the gcloud command, I can connect to it because that's going to use that gcloud key. But yeah, either way. So I need to actually, in order to use secure shell, right, I need to kind of create my own key. So the way I'm going to do that is follow some instructions actually. So if you look in, the instructions are creating a new key, open the link in the tab. I think there's only one command I think I need to know. So if you scroll through this list, there's one sidebar here. One of the risks of creating keys like this and storing them in that metadata is that now my machine forever has pretty much access to any instances in this project. Unless someone comes in, let's say if I leave the company, I still have that key, I still can get in. So the risk there is that people will forget to delete my keys out of the metadata server. And that's sort of that's what this whole risk thing is. So, but we're going to not heed that. We're going to go ahead and create a key. And the command is something like this. I'll walk you through it as I type it. File key name. Okay, I got it. So paste this. So there's a command called secure shell keygen. It's an RSA key. I'm going to store it in a file called training. That's where the keys are going to be created. And the username is going to be John, no, not John. I'm going to call it training. Actually, I'm going to just use my personal email address, just because it gets confusing otherwise. So this by the way, this email address, it's really just there for like allow you to match keys to people, right? It's not really used in any meaningful way. It's just like an identifier for the key. So I do this. I'm not going to use the passphrase because I don't want to have to always type in a passphrase. And I go into my secure shell folder. And see, I got these two keys now. So if I cat the training.pub, okay, and I copy this, and I go into, get rid of that, keep that, I hit edit, I'm going to add a key at the bottom, so many keys. Okay, so this basically picked up the identifier. the email identifier is John at Kentucky LLC, but it shows it as John, right? So I hit save. Okay, so that top key now is my new training key. So now I should be able to connect. Let's see if I can get my IP address for this thing. Copy that. If I do this right, so again, if I just type in this, it should fail, right? That's because I'm not telling what key to use. So if I go secure shell -I believe, shell, and then I type in training, I believe, right, that's the private key. Then I paste in, I did this right, and I didn't do it right. So let me pause the video for a second, get my head, oh, I know it's wrong. Well, oh, I know it's wrong. One thing that, let's see, one thing I forgot to do is that training, you have to change the ownership of it or the visibility of it so that it's only readable by you. So that's one problem I have. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to work. I think I have another problem, but. Right, so I'm going to pause the video for a second and troubleshoot, but I think I know what the problem is. So give me a second. Okay, we're back. So I learned something new. So one of the things, if you look carefully at the keys that I created, the username here is actually John, and the key is this key. So the mistake I made was, well, I'll show you what the mistake was. The mistake I was doing, well, I made two mistakes. One was I was using a capital I instead of a lowercase I. So that's how you identify the key. But what was happening was, I mean, once I fixed that, I had this error. I would try to log in, it says it wouldn't work. That's because right now, who am I? I'm logged in as J Tucker on my machine. So it's going to try to use J Tucker as my identity. So if I really wanted to probably do this right, when I created that key locally, I should have probably provided J Tucker as part of my, like J Tucker at Lower Kentucky LLC or something. Otherwise, I have to, now to get around this for now, is I actually have to specify a login name of John. So secure shell John with this key name. If I do this now, now I'm logged in properly onto the instance using that key. So either way, long story short, that's how you create keys. And there are, just so you know, there's a way to actually, have to keep on typing it in your keys. There is a bit, oh, let me get out of this. So one thing that's kind of a pain here is that, see, I have to always provide this -I with this. Just so you know, this is kind of a sidebar, but there's a command called secure shell add. Actually, right. So actually, now that I've logged in once with that key, I have something called secure shell agent in here. So now I should be able to log in without having, now that I've logged in once, that key is stored in my agent. And so now I should be able to go and get rid of this key entry, I believe. I still have to change my login name, right? But now I'm logged in the box. So that to do this perfectly, I would have probably, since I'm always logged in as J Tucker locally, I should have made my identifier for the key involving J Tucker at something, and then I wouldn't have to always provide my login name. But either way, a lot more about keys that I really wanted to cover. Now there's one other thing that we're going to do is we're going to go in and create another instance. So I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to illustrate two features. One is, actually, I think I could do this without creating a new one. I'm going to do this by editing an existing one. Let's see if that works, because I'm too lazy. I'm going to hit edit, and underneath, way down here at the bottom here, right? So there's another feature where you can actually turn on blocking project-wide keys. So if I check this box and hit save, I'm going to guess I'm not going to be able to log into this box using those public keys. So let me pause the video while this saves And then when it's done, I'll come back. Okay, we're back. So it just saved. So now I've turned on the block of the project-wide keys. And so if I try to use this project-wide key, I would expect to see it failing, and it does. Now, interesting enough, you can now override that now. Let's say, so this would just block all project-wide keys, but let's say I wanted to go back in now and maybe use my training key specifically. So I can go back into Secure Shell, and I'll just show by example. Training.pub, public key, and this better work. So I grab my key again, right? The public side of the key. I'm going to go edit the instance. So instead of using a public wide key, you can actually put keys directly into the instance metadata, right? And then I can save this. And I'll pause the video until this saves. Okay, so now I've gone in and I've added the instance-specific key, right? So I blocked all the public the keys from the project, but then I went back in and added my training key. So now, if it works out right, I should be able to now log in, back in with my training key, which is, again, right now, as a reminder, the reason I don't have to provide a key is I have that training key is right here. So I should be able to type in this, and now I'm logged in again. Okay, so I think that is about all there is to talk about keys that I can think of. So that's it for this video.